My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you're here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. I've been working in schools for a long time, and whether it's middle school or high school, boys or girls, you always end up surprised at the excuses kids will come out with to get out of doing homework, giving a test, or even coming to school. From the classic, the dog ate my homework, to others more complicated, including travel and injuries, sports, tournaments. Kids get very creative to get out of what they need to do, an excuse that will help them not fulfill their obligation. And this is kind of what we see in today's gospel. The Pharisees who are coming up with excuses on why Jesus shouldn't be helping this poor woman who has been suffering this illness for 18 years, being crippled by a spirit, bent over, completely incapable of standing erect. And Jesus, seeing her, having mercy on her, calls her and says, "Woman, you are set free of your infirmity." He laid his hands on her, and she at once stood up straight and glorified God. What should have been reason for joy, for happiness, this woman had been healed. He could once again walk straight, became an attack on Jesus Christ. It was a Saturday, the Sabbath, and the Pharisees are indignant. There are 6 days when work should be done, they say. Come on those days to be cured, not on the Sabbath day. He's not speaking to Jesus, but obviously he's being critical to what our Lord is doing. Hypocrites, our Lord will call him. Thank God Jesus healed that woman. Thank God Jesus didn't give in to the easy excuse that would have kind of authorized him to not pay attention to this woman. But obviously, like everything else in the Gospels, this needs to be a reminder for us because we can be very much like these people who are indignant and these people that come up with excuses. Even though we might not be in high school or middle school anymore, we still come up with excuses. Probably more elaborate excuses, but still excuses to not do what we need to do. Excuses to not live charity. Excuses to not forgive. And I've heard many of those excuses when it comes to high school or middle school. I think those excuses can be kind of forgiven because they're kids, first of all, but then also because, let's be honest, the things that are not that important, right? I mean, missing school one day is not the end of the world. I'm sure those of you who are students here would agree. Not turning in homework on a specific day. It's not the most important thing in the world. And I'm sure teachers here will not agree with me. Not giving a test. No one has died for that. But when it comes to adult excuses, they relate to things that are much more important, like the case that we just read in the Gospels. A woman who has been suffering for 18 years. That seems like a good reason to help this woman. Just like Jesus tells the Pharisees that when they have an ox or an ass and they're thirsty or hungry, even though it's a Sabbath, they still untie the ox from the manger and lead it out for watering. Because otherwise, that ox would die if it doesn't get enough water. Sounds like an important reason to maybe not live the Sabbath to the last comma. Well, saving this woman's life, healing her from her infirmity, was even more important than that. And many other things to which we find excuses in our lives as grown ups, as adults, are also very important, like forgiving your mom or your dad for something maybe they've done to you in the past, for some hurt, maybe something objective. And maybe it's been months or years that I haven't talked to them, that I haven't been nice to them. What's more important than being in good standing, in good relationship with our families, forgiving them, moving on, or apologizing if that's what needs to be done, if we were the ones hurting others? We find excuses. We shelter ourselves behind something that seems reasonable to us, but that maybe isn't. Maybe the difficulties with a brother or a sister or a good friend. Maybe it's a problem at work. Maybe it's something I know I should do for a colleague or your wife or children. And we always come up with the perfect excuse that seems to make us even righteous, right? Because in the case of these Pharisees, I mean, they think they are being righteous because they're actually respecting the law. The Sabbath is so important. And it is, right? It was. The law is important. The Sabbath was important for the Jews. Jesus is not dismissing it. It's not saying that that's a ridiculous law because it wasn't. But there wasn't a good reason to not live charity, to not heal someone who was suffering. Just like our excuses probably are not good enough. And it's good that we bring them to Jesus Christ and that we go to him in our prayer, like we're doing now. Lord, this is my excuse. Say it out loud to our Lord in his presence. Even better if you're in church or in a chapel where Jesus is present in the tabernacle with his mother Mary nearby. Tell him your excuse out loud and see if it's something that he would say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Or if he might be maybe saying, like, hey, yeah, that's a good excuse, but no, go and apologize. Go and make up with that person. Go and live that act of charity. That's way more important. Swallow your pride and move on. What a good moment to ask these things to our Lord, to ask Our Lady for her grace too, because it's not easy. Sometimes to forgive, to apologize, to do what needs to be done. Help us, Mother, that we may not find excuses I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.